My phone will vibrate. All right, we are now live. Peace and love, everyone. Welcome to my channel. If you're new, please like and subscribe. And tonight we are talking with our beloved guest. Always a pleasure to see him, the Patuxent Riverkeeper Fred Tubman. And tonight we're talking about climate change or climate disaster and can we avert it. This year 2023 we are facing a lot of climate change, a lot of climate activity going on. Some is very drastic and having dramatic effects on all of us. We're all being affected in some way, so it's a global issue, it's a planetary issue affecting every part of our planet. Rivers are drying up in some places, temperatures are getting warmer, seasons are getting more bizarre. It's almost like sometimes, some years, you can't tell one from the other. Storms and hurricanes are getting stronger and fiercer. Forest fires are more destructive. Flooding is more intense. In addition to all of those changes, there's lots of hazards like air and water pollution, oil spills, pipeline disasters, mudslides, fracking, and etc. And all of this is happening on a regular basis. Farmers are stating that crops are not growing like they used to decades ago. So, what is going on? I mean, there's a lot of talk, but there's no definite answers from some people, and there's no solutions yet. Our planet seems to be in danger. Many people are blaming it on the hazardous environmental decisions made in the past. And tonight we're going to be just exploring, should we continue to allow legislators to make environmental decisions for us, or should we take the responsibility to save the planet and clean it up ourselves? So let's explore this very important topic tonight with our guest, Fred Tubman. And welcome again, Fred.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here. And I
Yeah.
apologize for smiling a little bit there because I was thinking if this is a newscast, I might as well, I might as well pull my brains out.
Yeah, I try to write like an introduction of what we're going to talk about tonight, so I'm not rambling. But all of these are things that we talk about at work, or in the symposiums that I go to, and things dealing with the environment. So yeah, I didn't try not to sound too newscasty.
Yeah, so now that we're suitably depressed, here's
Yeah.
what I think is going on. And it's complicated. It's like most things in life. And I just tell it like I see it. I don't have any particular source of wisdom. But here's what I see. As a guy who lives close to land, as a farmer,
Mhm,
sometime farmer anyway, and a family heritage there, I
mhm,
know that the rhythms of the earth are changing. There are
mhm,
all kinds of things going on with the seasons and how they change and when they change.
mhm,
One stupid thing, but I mean, it's not evidence of everything, but everything if you connect it. For years, I never had to rake any leaves out of my lawn because the wind would come right in on schedule and blow
uh-huh.
them right on into the wood. And I thought, well, that's cool. I don't have to get a
Well, I
rake.
thought that only happened in my yard. It seemed like every time we get ready to rake them, when I let enough of them fall, I said, "Well, I'm gonna rake tomorrow." Next morning, you get up, the wind took care of it for me.
But the point is that it's the prevailing wind. The wind shifted direction for the winter. And so I knew right about October something or other that wind was going to change and head this way and blow the leaves out of the yard. I
Mhm,
mean, on a scientific test, that wind sometimes was so dramatic, in fact, that I remember there was a birdhouse on a 4x4 post in my yard. And the wind was so forceful one year, it snapped that post, right? The top of to be fair, the top of the birdhouse was really heavy. So
mhm.
there was a bit of sway, but it snapped it. If you can imagine that kind of wind, and that's a noticeable shift. Is my point. That's not the
Yes.
prevailing wind; it's the seasonal wind. And
Mhm,
so there are other rhythms, when the fruit drop off the tree, things like that. Stuff we
mhm,
used to laugh at the old people when they would talk about that stuff. Oh, the walnuts didn't turn green in the right. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Whatever.
mhm.
There's some truth to this stuff in terms
Yes.
of the Earth's rhythm. And I think
Yes.
we can see that. And we know that people are dying like crazy left and right and suffering from natural disasters, not just war, but stuff the Earth has generated. Volcanoes, you mentioned a few. I don't want to mention any more because that's an even more depressing newscast.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm a little pessimistic about some of this stuff because
Mhm,
some of it is stuff that is hard to undo,
mhm,
actually. So if this is an open mic, let me tell you a bizarre story. I had a friend visit from
mhm,
Japan recently,
mhm,
Dr. Komatsu. Really interesting guy, actually speaks very good English. He was the head of a marine fisheries industry, ministry at one
okay.
time in Japan. Now he's an academic. And he
Mm-hmm.
makes occasional trips to the United States trying to make various connections, academic stuff. So Komatsu explained to me that his entire family was wiped out by a tsunami. He was
Oh
it was the
Lord.
same tsunami that apparently wiped out part of Fukushima, the nuke plant.
Okay.
And so he said everything he grew up with, and the house he was born in, all that stuff, gone, just like gone, like a
Mm-hmm.
tsunami, wiped out. He said that his country builds these seawalls. He said there are X number of meters high. I think he said something like 50 meters high or something like that. He said the
Mm-hmm.
history shows that every tsunami that's ever hit Japan is about twice that. He says they build these seawalls because people like to see them, and they produce jobs, and some of them, become, I guess, people put murals and do all other kinds of stuff, but
Right.
they don't save anybody's life, basically. And so Komatsu's theme is that he's into sustainability. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, how sustainable is this mess? Like, can we find a better way to save some people's lives, save everything they know, other
Mm-hmm.
than doing these things that are very, very popular and people run on elections? I got the so and so seawall built,
Mm-hmm.
but it's utterly pointless. So
Mm.
if you see where I'm going with this, is kind of
Yes.
like, so what
I
can we
was
do?
wondering how they worked.
What
Okay, so
can we
now we know they
do?
don't work. Okay.
In the face of this really good business not saving the planet, what can we do? Those
Mm-hmm.
of us who actually really want to save the planet. I think that's what
Yes.
it boils down to. I think, unfortunately, it's a patchwork quilt of stuff. We all do what we can do. We sue polluters when we can, when we need to, if it's
Mm-hmm.
deeper, and that helps make, I think, legal change, because we fight fights for the most part that are going to fix or kind of tweak a policy. I mean, sometimes we're suing to get justice, but most of the time we're suing to change the system so that there will be more justice in general. And
Mm-hmm.
what does that do with climate change? These are systemic problems. They're part of a big economic complex. How people do things the way they do them now. The failure, I think, in the environmental community to acknowledge that most of the stuff they want us to do is actually kind of expensive. You have to really have the money to do some of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. You want some solar panels on your house? Yeah, you can get some grants and so on. But at the end, you also have to have good credit. So there's these industries surrounding these green industries that I
Mm-hmm.
think also need to be reformed. And obviously, we're running out of time. These guys are already, when I say these guys, I mean the system, they're already planning to move to Mars, even though, granted, there's no water there. What are they talking about? But
Right.
mind you, we don't make the rules. We just serve on the plantation. So we're not going to Mars, you and me. What can we do here? I think
Right.
that's what it boils down to. And unfortunately, I think the answer is we save what we can save. We do what we can to save what we can save. We're not going to save all of it, unfortunately. We hope somebody doesn't push some stupid nuclear button and make it all moot. You know, um, we know the background radiation in the oceans is increasing annually. They
Mm.
think from scuttled nuclear reactors and other junk that people have shoved into trenches that they can't get to out
Mm-hmm.
there in the ocean. So yes, it's true we're running out of time, and the only way I can get through the kind of work we do spiritually is
Mm.
I've convinced myself that we go down fighting.
So we
If they do
say that
blow up
again,
the planet,
please.
we go down fighting. We
Fighting.
don't go
Yes.
meekly, go gently. We go hard. We go how we go, but we try to be more humane. We try not to bruise. We're not a movement that advocates violent insurrection or any of that stuff. We're certainly not insurrectionists. We're people who have a deep connection to our communities, to where we live, to where we are, and we do what we can do. And I think that's the understanding that I would impart to people. Do what you can do. I can't. It's not
Right.
for me to say go join something or go do something. It's a little bit of everything, but we have to do what we can do. And maybe if there's an under rule to that, find community, attach yourself to or engender or create some sense of community, this shared common interest. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's tribal, maybe it's tribalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sustaining thing. It'll help you when you're in grief, and it will bury you when you're dead. It'll do
Yeah.
all kinds of things for you if you attach yourself to community or build community wherever you go, whatever community means to you.
And
Because
build
I think
community resilience too.
sure.
Yeah.
And yes,
Right.
resilience. Think about that. Even resilience is a compromise, right? You have to have something to resil against. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Resilience means how much can we take? How much can we take and still be ourselves? How much can we to be viable?
Yes.
So we save what we can save. We can save all of it, great. But
Mm-hmm.
in my wheelhouse, as much as they talk about saving it, on that Chesapeake Bay, they haven't saved a single river in about 40, 50 years of really serious funding. So believe me, it ain't a funding problem necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think there's a structural problem.
Okay. Well,
I'll
before
leave
we
it.
go any further, let's have you proper introduction, introduce yourself, and just tell the listening audience a little bit about yourself as the Patuxent River Keeper,
So
please.
I'm a river keeper as a part of a broader movement of water keepers from all around the world. We're licensed to use the term water keeper, creek keeper. We're a variety of different types of keepers. I
Mhm.
am the founder of Patuxent River Keeper, which operates entirely within Maryland because the river that we protect is entirely within the state of Maryland. It starts and ends in the far north above Columbia, Maryland. It goes all the way to Chesapeake Bay, deep in southern Maryland, in Solomons. I've been doing that work for about 20 years. I was a television producer, writer, guy. Did a lot of different stuff in television, media, and radio back in the from the 1970s to 2000.
Mhm.
And during the course of going to midlife law school, I learned about the waterkeeper, and it was like, oh, this is totally cool. I can do this. I have this. It has all the skills and attributes I've learned and all these other things I've tried.
Mhm.
So I was pretty excited to do it, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's more than I bargained for. To be honest, I thought I'd do it for about 5 years. I figured that was about as long as I could afford to work for not much money,
Mhm.
really. I mean, because it was intriguing that people didn't flock to fund us because I think we did some very ingenious things at Protection
Mhm.
Riverkeeper early on. Because I think we've been pretty honest about our commitment to do work that was real. We tried
Mhm.
pretty hard to make sure there's some beef and that we're not just, a society where people get together and hold hands and tell fish stories and
Mhm.
raise money, you know, really. So it's a different culture that I think people encounter in bigger green movements. So that was a
Okay.
long-winded answer to your question, but if that gives you a feel for what the Tucson.
Yeah. Yeah. That was great.
And we've been
So,
effective. I didn't say that, but we've been effective. We've won a few lawsuits along the way. We've managed to change state law. We've implemented.
oh, good, good.
Yeah, we've
Okay.
we've actually gotten some stuff done. Yeah, and continue to.
Right, right. With the activism, and that's good to for the community to hear that things can change. You can fight the good fight and get some results.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, are we facing a climate change? Well, you did mention that the cycle. There's no doubt that the Earth cycles are changing, but the climate disaster, is this just a natural? Do you think it's a natural cycle that's happening, or this is mostly, if not all, man-made?
Well, like I said, I have some close friends who do in fact argue that this is natural for the planet.
Mhm.
It's an interesting supposition. They don't really know that that's the case, right? And I'd be the first to admit that any climate pattern, any system is cyclical. Just saying what the cycle is and what our human contribution is to accelerating these cycles. The cycles are not. These are serious hardships. I mean, I
Mhm.
think the kind of people who make those arguments are maybe really aloof, like the kind of people who go to their private island when there's a COVID epidemic
Mhm.
underway, right? I mean, you can't be connected to the world and honestly think that people are subject to natural disasters created by human behavior, right?
Mhm.
Some people have argued that fracking, for example, is something
Yes.
that can create fractures and well, that's what it does, right? But I mean, maybe that eventually will displace tectonic plates or have
Mhm.
some kind of impact on earthquake stuff. Either way, we know
Yes.
the people who suffer the most are regular folks, people
Mhm.
scratching, people just trying to live. That's when they talk about climate justice. They're arguing that any of these floods and various other impacts created that were avoidable
Mhm.
because they were part of human intervention. They were part of human contribution. I think that's
Mhm.
really the point. We could change that. We could stop
Right.
that. We could do
Right.
something about that.
That's
Does that
absolutely.
help? I don't know if it goes to the heart of your question, but I mean, but yes, I
Yes.
think
Yes.
it's clear
Yes.
that there's a climate problem upon us. It's clear
Yes.
that there's some of those, even based on science, I'm not dismissive of science ever, but I'm saying too, science isn't always defining. But,
Mhm.
but coupled with both intuition, folklore, knowledge, history, right, coupled with available science, we know
Mhm.
what various CO2 levels do. There are people who actually make a living,
Mhm.
monitoring and calculating based on that.
Right.
These are
Absolutely.
known quantities. So there's some pretty hard science that points to there's some things humans can do in terms of our contribution. Some things we've done, certainly, too, to try and minimize what
Mhm.
we're putting into the atmosphere and what we're doing generally with the climate. And, um,
Mhm.
we're poisoning the planet. There's no doubt about that. I mean, even wildlife seem to be fighting back at times.
Yes.
They know we're
Yes.
out of balance, out of sync. Um, So yeah, we're really up against it. These are serious problems. As much as I don't want to be the dreary newscast, it's it's important for us to be engaged.
Hmm.
I'm a guy that had the financial means. It wasn't very expensive. I'm just saying I don't buy things lightly. I don't hang around the keyboard looking for stuff to buy. I bought a Geiger counter after the last political administration because a cheap one, and because I didn't trust the government would tell us the truth about what radiation is going on. So I learned a few things. I learned that the radiation levels are very different all over the country. Where you live and how much ambient radiation you're exposed to matters greatly based on where you live, based
Hmm.
on all kinds of factors that create that. I think it's worth knowing. And so from time to time, I actually do check, and it fluctuates at various times.
Hmm.
I happen to be in that club of people that think that certain types of radiation can have a negative effect on human biology. We don't want too
Absolutely.
much radiation, right? We don't want certain types of radiation. Who's monitoring that? Where are the radiation police? It's
Right.
up to us. At the point of time, I'm not just trying to be silly. Take a look. It's up to us. We have to take these problems in tow because they're
Yes.
community-based problems.
Yes. Yes. Well, in your opinion, when did this current climate disaster? Well, I don't want to use negative terminology. When did this current climate situation start? When do you, in your opinion?
Well, interesting question. When did it start? I think it's been going on for hundreds of years. Mostly when
Okay.
we industrialized the world.
I think so too.
Industrialization, which is an arc, in our side of the world. What's that? This sometime in the 1800s. Really, with the arrival of the steam engine. Which
Mm.
is now that I think about, it, because I'm a nerd about steam technology. I love that stuff.
Are you okay?
You can see what you're looking at. There's a boiler, there's a tube. I mean, it's not like a car. You ever tried to look under the hood of a car?
Yes.
I don't know what any of that stuff does, but I'm looking at a steam engine. I know what everything does. So I'm fascinated by that stuff, and I'm actually a nerd enough to go around looking for blueprints of old steam engines and stuff like that. So I know something about industrialization, industrial age technology. That and blacksmithing, that's kind of a cousin to that interest. So yeah, right about then we started belching a lot of coal
Yes.
into the air. That was really the backbone of the industrialization. That's where the steel industry, the rail industry, all
Yes.
these industries that building of skyscrapers and bridges, big bridges, yeah, all that stuff came with coal, basically, a fossil fuel, right? That granted we've moved away from, right, but we've also got kind of a society addicted to a certain way of living,
True.
and
And
so
a
that's
certain way of living that has proved to be harmful, but they just still want to continue using, you know, yeah.
yeah. So I really muse about this, but I hope this is not too esoteric a point. I've always been fascinated that the ethic about that is the same in so-called developing nations as it is in highly advanced nations. Right? An
Mhm.
example of that is people literally on the front lines of some Sahelian place in West Africa, and they're looking at drought and they're talking about cycles and all that kind of stuff. In a way, they're sort of resigned to the way things are,
Mm.
and don't know how to conceive of a solution, right? For them, you go to the other side of the world, and the same thing is really going on, except they have lots and lots of money to throw at those problems. Those guys on the other side of the world had no money to research, explore, write white papers, have meetings, make PowerPoints. They just can observably see the world's really changing for them in ways they cannot control. Those other guys spent all that money on the other side of the world to
Mm.
essentially come to the same conclusion. And that, to me, is a real irony about the arrogance, of Western interests, the belief that we know stuff and you know, we can send people into space and we can do all this stuff as though that goes to their quality as a civilization. What kind of ideas are we talking about?
Absolutely.
Uplifting people? Are we helping them thrive?
Mhm.
All
And we
right,
have
that's it for
somebody in the chat. Dia said, "Hey, so welcome, welcome."
okay.
Um, why do you think some legislators are and some politicians are denying that we're facing this um climate crisis? I think.
That's a good question. I actually know some folks on the other side, and it's not widely known. I know people from everywhere. I worked in a Republican administration. I did contracting for the White House Office of Communications when Ronald Reagan was president. I used to
Okay.
give him jokes. I used to give the guy jokes. I was just one of the
Okay.
guys just one of the guys who worked there. So I knew and know a lot of Republicans and conservatives, and I also worked for the Christian Broadcast Network. I mean, I met a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people in the religious right of this country,
Mm-hmm.
real up close and personal. And so my sense of things is it's not so much the resistance to the science of climate change. It's a total resistance to an issue that's very concerning to people they really despise. As sad as that sounds, it's personal. I think it's personal. They don't want to be on the same side of the fence with some people they really are mad about abortion
Mm-hmm.
stuff and gender stuff and all this other stuff that happens to be on the extreme right agenda of the country. And yeah, it's really not only divisive, it's confusing as hell. I don't think people know what to think
Mm-hmm.
sometimes,
Right.
you know? And so it's hard to get to the heart of the matter. It's hard to get to the truth
Mm-hmm.
of the matter sometimes because there's just so much stuff. Somebody sent me some stuff. I'm going to say what it was precisely, but someone sent me some stuff this evening that was total fantasy. Um, it was like I went to Snopes, the Snopes website, just to see if someone had investigated this and fact checked it, and it turned out to be total nonsense. But it had caught fire on the internet, on YouTube or someplace,
Mm-hmm.
and people had this idea about something that totally never happened. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know what I'm talking about? I mean, like just all these ideas that fly around where
Yes.
there's just too much information, and when people can't tell the difference between good information and bad information. And so, yeah, it's really baffling. People ask me 20 times a day, um, what's happening with the river and how's it doing, and they might get 20 different answers.
Mm-hmm.
Because it might depend on how I'm feeling that day.
Mm-hmm.
To be honest, I can give them the objective numbers. Yeah, I got a D minus on state report cards, but don't go fishing there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the subtext to what we talk about is the
Yes.
my personal reaction to some of this stuff. So
Mm.
yeah, my sense of it, we don't know what to think. And again, that's where community I think comes in. It's sometimes a little more verifiable if you can compare notes with people who think as you think, who have your back.
Yes. Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and for
Yes.
years I was suspicious of well, okay, I'll name names. I don't think any of us are going to get sued. I didn't watch Al Jazeera because I thought, oh, well, they must be attached to some really dark stuff. Then I thought some really good reporting going on there.
Yes.
You
Mm-hmm.
have some good information. Wait a minute. Don't jump to the conclusion, because of where their money comes from and other stuff. Now, conversely, do I think there's ever any good information on Fox? Well, it'd be hard, just for my political leanings, for me to say totally no. There must be at least some good information to be found there. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
less than I find in places where, granted, I like their news better. Some other places that I like their news better. It seems authentic to me. I used to work there. Actually, in the case of CNN, I used to work there.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I don't think they mean to get it right. I think, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the tactics they've used in recent years, where I thought they really crossed the line, they were clearly editorializing where there was a thin line between news coverage and opinion. I
Mm-hmm.
think they were really countering what was happening on the right side of that game. Those guys were unabashed about doing
Right.
it. They drew no distinction at all between total fact and total fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So why get mad at those guys for at least occasionally trying to draw at least a gentle line, a chalk
Yeah.
line, not a sharpie, but a really really slender line.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, I
Yeah.
keep drifting from your central question, but
No,
it's
that's okay. You having fun tonight. I see you having a good time. So,
yeah,
um, we
I
have
am
a
tired. It's
you.
true.
I know you said we won't be too long, but there's a question in or comment in the chat. Dia says they know they're destroying the earth, but they don't care, and I guess she's talking about in response to the question I asked about the legislators, and it's very disheartening to hear some of them speaking about what's happening on the earth. And you would think that we all got to breathe the same air, we're all going to be drinking the same water, presumably. Well, and why is it some people who are in positions of power that can make certain decisions are not concerned about, or even listening to the citizens complain that they don't want gold mining in their state, or they don't want because I sit in on some of these town hall meetings for, they don't want um pipelines to run through their states or their area because of the potential risk of it bursting and contaminating the water supply. And you and I both know, because by you being a river keeper, you know that all the earth is like, it's a living entity, and all those rivers at some point will connect or intersect or will reach each other at some point. So if one river is sick, it's going to affect the bay, or which all the rivers, will flow into, or the ocean, or what have you, or it's a several rivers can converge in one watershed. So if one is contaminated, it likely is going to cross contaminate the other one. So
Mhm. I'm glad you asked that question.
okay.
In the notes that you sent me before our conversation tonight, you had a question and a quote in there, and
Yes. You
with
want me to read
regret,
it, or you want to read it? You can read it.
well, would you forgive me if I gave you my own quote?
No, by all means. Come on.
Maybe yours too. It's your show. but
No, we welcome that interactiveness. So go ahead.
I found a quote that I thought answered your question, essentially, that really impressed me. So actually, to be fair, could you read your quote first, so people will know what I'm responding to?
I sure will. My quote
There you go.
was,
We'll
and
co-produce
this is
that.
an unknown quote. I just copied it down. I saw one day on a post. It says, "We abuse land because we regard it as a commodity belonging to us. When we see land as a commodity to which we belong, we may begin to use it with love and respect." And that is a quote that I saw in a environmental science class, folks, in
Mhm.
case somebody want to say, "Oh, you copied it from such and such." So I saw that on a poster.
Got it.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, and thank you for letting me, go off the reservation here.
That's all
So this
right.
is from this book. It's a
The
really
geography of
of
nowhere.
nowhere by Howard Kunstler. Really, really interesting book. But
Mhm.
in there, here is a quote. It's only a tad longer than yours, but bear with me.
Sure.
He says, America's were the most liberal property laws on earth when they were established. The chief benefits were rapid development of the wilderness, equal opportunity for those with cash and or ambition, simplicity of acquisition, and the right to exploitation, such as chopping down all the virgin white pine forests of Michigan. They called it mining trees. Our
Mm,
laws gave the individual clear title to make his own decisions, but they also deprived him of the support of community and custom and the presence of sacred places. The identification of this extreme individualism of property ownership is with all that is sacred in American life has been the source of many of the problems that we have today.
mhm,
But above all, here's the final piece, it tends to degrade the idea of a public realm and hence of the landscape of tissue that ties together the thousands of pieces of private property that make up a town, a suburb, and a state. And it degrades the notion that the private individual has a responsibility to the public realm, or to put it another way, that the public realm is the physical manifestation of the common good.
mm,
I
mm.
thought that was so powerfully said. To me,
Yes.
it summed up what was broken at the heart of some of these systems, where we actually, most cases, as much as we occasionally win in court, we generally lack the legal tools to fix what is truly broken. It's
Mhm,
just perfectly legal. It's morally reprehensible, but perfectly legal.
mhm,
So the systemic problems are real. It's not just a series of little itty bitty battles. We really have to fix the big picture of this, which is takes generations, I think.
mhm,
Just takes generations and generations of people to fight for that change. Anything we have on this planet today as black people in America was built entirely upon the accomplishments of people who came before us,
mhm,
who fought really, really hard. I hope my mother wouldn't get mad at me. I will reveal. She was mad at a particular place in Anne Arundel County for years and years and years because she
mhm,
and my father wanted to buy a home there in 1962, and it was restricted. Black people couldn't buy there, and so
mhm,
she never set foot in that place again. She was so mad at that zip code and that
mhm,
she wouldn't spend a dime, wouldn't stop for gas, wouldn't have anything to do with that place. My grandma Hazel, told me she would never fly on an airline again after 1959. She had to give up her seat to a white person on an airlines flight.
mhm.
I'll name the airline because it's still in business today. But
Right.
she was so mad and so humiliated by that experience that she punished the entire airline
She
industry
boycotted it.
for the
Right.
rest of her life. that not a single airline would ever get any of her money because they might in some way be connected to those guys who really made her mad in 1960.
Right, right.
How huge? How huge is that? We don't have those particular problems most of the time today. We're
Mhm.
doing so much better in so many ways, but have so much further to go. And this environmental stuff to me is the heart of it. Because when you get
Yes,
around to it, the environment is pretty much what's in your immediate vicinity.
yes. It's affecting
Circumstantially,
everything. It's affecting the agriculture. It's
yeah,
affecting
yeah. What's both
the
is what I'm saying. Immediate vicinity,
behavior. Yeah,
yeah, but it's still connected. Yeah, but
yeah.
it's also subjective, is what I'm also trying to say. The environment I have in my zip code. If you look online, people don't live nearly as long in my particular zip code as they do in other parts of the state. And you
Hmm.
can't tell me that's just circumstance or bad luck. Clearly, environmental factors have something to do with our longevity, with our mortality,
Yes.
with everything about us, our attitude.
Your mental health, your physical
Right?
health.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a big deal. So the
Hmm.
environment to me is kind of where it's at. It's about everything. And if you don't have water, you don't have anything. Those people going to Mars, they're idiots. There's nothing with water in it
Yeah.
on, on Mars.
Yeah.
In
I
any
mean,
event,
but instead of focusing your energy and all that money that is being generated to pay for these trips to Mars or these colonies
mhm,
on Mars, why not use that to help heal and clean up the planet and,
mhm,
redistribute the wealth and stop some of the industry that's causing the damage? Why not
mhm,
do that?
mhm. Yeah, I'm totally with you that's the root problem. But in the meantime, we fight where we fight. We do what we can. We work where we work. We do what we can to leave the place a little better than when we arrived. I think that's
Mhm.
the basic
That's a good
essence.
answer. That's a
We
real
try to
good
make things a little better,
reducing your
a little
footprint.
better
Okay.
to the extent we
Um,
can.
how can we teach people that the planet must be preserved and is not to be used just for resources and profit?
Gosh. Right. Yeah, you want the secret of youth while we're at it? I mean, think about it. I mean, is this about human nature? I don't know. It's about self-interest. I don't know. I just know that the monetary system, the social system in this country
Mhm,
is is totally linked to stature based upon net worth and skin
mhm,
color and stuff that has nothing to do with the underlying merits of a person.
mhm,
It's still very much embedded, but I don't know a place where that isn't true. That's the problem.
mhm,
I really don't know a place where that some of that isn't true.
mhm.
Some places just haven't institutionalized it to the same degree, but
Right.
I see it in, dare I say it, I even see it in Cuba and places like that. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, there's some classism embedded, I think, within the human soul. I like to think it's about tribalism. We just hang with the folks who are like us. Period.
Mhm,
And the story is not
yeah,
complicated. If you magnify that into something more hateful and mean, it
mhm,
becomes, it becomes about, worse stuff. But
mhm.
at its heart, I think we hang out. If you look at the selfies on Facebook, it's mostly people hang with people like them. Mostly,
This is true.
mostly, and I think
People are tribbing up, so yeah.
there's
But
nothing wrong with that. I don't see a single thing wrong with that in principle. I do think that, on the other hand, things that are, quote, dare I say the word diverse, because I hate that word because it's really is misused. But that's the universe too. I mean, the most durable stuff out there is the stuff that's kind of got a little bit of everything mixed in it. I mean,
mhm,
it's not these, pure one of anything. As a metallurgist, it's not just pure iron. That's the weakest stuff there is. You mix it with other additives in order to get something that's really robust and wonderful and keen and survivable and sustainable.
mhm,
So I think there's just this paradox of who humans are and our capacity to think big about the future of our beyond just our tribe, you know, or to operate peaceably. I think maybe that also ultimately becomes a population problem. Maybe. Eventually you run out of room and then you really have to compete for space. I don't think that's the problem now, though. I mean, we might be getting there. I
mhm.
think historically, if you look at where the development patterns are in this country, it's not like we don't have enough places to put people.
True.
Truthfully, we do
Mhm,
cluster close to each other in community where economies are. I guess maybe that's the. There's this great book by James Michener called The Source. It's about water and how this civilization rises and falls at the same spot because there's a well there. over like millions of years. There's always a civilization there because there's a well there.
Right.
The well is kind of the center of community life, and
Water. Yeah, the water supply is our center for
yeah,
community life. You're right.
revolutions come and go, but the water's still there. And those people don't remember anything about the people who came 1,000 years before them, as
Mm.
much as they're drinking the same water as they did. You know what I mean?
That's an interesting point. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, that's wild if you think about it. It's a great book.
Yeah, it is.
You know?
Yeah, because we are living in places that have been inhabited for long periods of time in most places, and then I know I've been watching some and listening to some um, videos about archaeology, and whenever they dig and discover something, they discover an older civilization below that, something older below that, and so it's like people are constantly inhabiting certain places throughout time, if you will, and it's usually like you say at a water source.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's fascinating. The story of people is inseparable from the story of water.
And I think maybe that's why we're in the position that we're in now, because maybe because we've forgotten the
Hmm.
stories, or we don't know the stories of the people that lived in these areas before us, the ancestors, and so we don't know the stories, so we're making mistakes. Maybe if we knew
Hmm.
more or had a better connection with them, we would make better choices, perhaps.
Perhaps,
Yeah.
perhaps if people do the right stuff. I mean, right? If people follow the best information, if people really do what common sense
Mhm.
demands, you see why I'm laughing? Like, you know, what happened on the Titanic anyway? Right? I thought he
Mhm.
couldn't sink. you know, and
Yeah.
wow, wow. What's that other one recently? Oh, that submersible. Oh,
That
don't even get me
submarine,
started.
what was
Talk
it
about
called? It had a
hubris. Yeah,
Titan. Titan.
Titan. Talk about hubris. Really, these guys suspended the laws of physics. I mean, the paperwork said this much pounds per square inch, and like the specs say something much less. I mean, holy cow, hubris, and maybe too much money. Maybe, just maybe,
Just
too much
maybe.
money. I
Yeah.
felt that way working for those television networks years ago. These guys have too much money because they throw money at every problem. Money's easy. They can find plenty of that. Common sense, not so much. But money was easy because they just put in a request for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? There was a guy with a suitcase. We used to just go ask him for money when we needed it down in Buenos Aires. I remember this guy's name. I won't say it on the air now, but I mean, yeah, that was the gig. Can you imagine getting paid all this money, and if you need some more, just go see a guy with the suitcase.
Yeah.
Just write him a receipt. Just write him a receipt.
Mhm.
People,
What do you suggest we do to begin to solve this? Like, I mean, it's so many layers upon layers of this issue. What
hmm,
do you suggest? That we because you've been doing this kind of work for decades. So what do you suggest we begin?
where we begin in terms of getting involved with the issue itself. Is that what you're saying, or involve
Where do
something
we
else?
begin to start solve it? Because I feel like, if we wait on the government or policymakers to make the decision for us,
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna be waiting. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that as citizens of the
Mm-hmm.
earth and caretakers of the earth, we can ourselves we can start, in small ways doing great things like, maybe river cleanups, making
Yeah,
sure you
sure. Yeah,
recycle, making sure you reduce your carbon footprint, making sure you're not the problem, but the solution.
right.
Coming together, like you said, creating community or task force to
Mm-hmm.
address some of these environmental hazards and changes. We can start on our own. So, but what do you suggest we do to help avert this coming climate disasters?
Anything that involves, I think, being active and activist. You can attach yourself to any number of groups. I mean, we've worked with Chesapeake Climate Action and various other groups that are out there who kind of work elementally on the stuff that's important legislatively. But I
Mhm,
think also keep an eye too towards the impacts of both climate change and climate policy on where you live and where you care about. There are all
mhm,
kinds of things that are quite different if you're uplands, if you're inland, if you're talking
mhm,
about vulnerability to flooding and things like that. There are all kinds of opportunities. You can find them pretty readily on the internet. for deeper education about these things. But I'm a community-based activist. I'm the kind of guy who likes to make eye contact with the people I'm interacting with. So to the extent you can get climate activism on the agenda of like a local municipal thing, if there are grants the community can go and looking for in order to go and look for in order to
Mhm.
work on a particular local problem, you know, let me tell you what my reticence was, because I think you were asking for a global answer, and because I think the problem is not, it's really grassroots. In other words, the answer is always going to be closer to home than in New York, Chicago, or LA. The
Okay.
answers, the answers to the things you care about are more likely to be found close by, and
Mhm.
much more effective generally if it's attached to community. Another theme that we talked about a couple minutes ago. And generally follow your heart. Follow your heart for the things that you particularly care about.
I
You
like
know,
that. Oh, yeah.
the climate activists are a particular thing, breed of cat. Sometimes, you know. I think you were talking to Dia on the phone. She knows a lot about this, right?
Mhm.
I mean, these groups, 360.org and so on, they all have their own culture attached to them. So again, we're back to tribal. And so, if you're going to attach your work to some particular green, big green or small green, at
Mhm.
least be clear, kind of where your interests are, where your best interests are. That you're not fodder. And by that I mean groups that call me because they want a black face on the podium on the dais. They don't really care about our issues, but they want to make sure that we look like we're in, you know,
Mhm.
lockstep with their agenda. I don't have much patience for that stuff nowadays. Serving on boards just because they needed a dark face. That's real. I mean, I'm not making that up. That's a phenomenon. I asked a guy who was head of a big green, who works nationally, what his vision was for the inclusion and diversity. He said, "I don't know, Fred, but funders really like that stuff." That's what he said.
He said funders. Okay.
Funders really like that stuff. He didn't have a vision, and I think that's the problem we face as people of color. We want to make a difference.
Mhm.
Right? It's nice to work with these guys that are really adept at getting funded. Sometimes they really do make a difference. Sometimes they just do what they do. They
Yeah.
do what they do what's funded. I prefer the ones that are community based. They can point to mailing list, listserv, constituents, transparency, participatory opportunities, all of that stuff, as opposed to some ivory tower big outfit with an enormous budget, relying largely on wealth. The same guys who
Mhm.
want to go to Mars, really. I mean, isn't the space program in the hands of billionaires now? Same
Mhm.
folks, same folks run those movements. I guarantee you, they're dying to
Mhm.
get some Microsoft money and some big corporate money. They would, all of them. We won't name names, but they're all on that program. If they're a big green with all that infrastructure, all those big salaries and pensions, all those different titles, vice president in charge of whatever,
Mhm.
diversity, diversity.
Mhm.
We're stakeholders. Diversity, not even a thing. I've never seen a black community ask for more diversity. Diversity is somebody else's idea. We're not diversity. We're a part of this. We're a part of the conversation. We're leaders.
Mhm.
We're everything except just diversity.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you for your input and your activism that you do in the community, and trying to get people involved, and taking more, doing more capacity building. I appreciate what you do in the community, especially with our beloved Patuxent River, which I've learned so much about it since I've learned met you and grandmother Rabia. So
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me, go off topic.
yeah, thank you
Learn a
for
lot.
for,
You
for
know?
expressing and sharing this information with us, and hopefully as the listening audience hears it, it will motivate them to, like you said, pick a cause that is close to their heart that they will get more involved with.
Very
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
You betcha. You betcha.
All righty. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Fred, again. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your input and sharing with us. And the listening audience, thank you, each and every one of you. And I hope that everybody has a wonderful, peaceful rest of their week. Please, please get involved with um, making the planet better in any way, in any capacity that you can, please. So keep in mind that we do have the power within ourselves and within our communities, and there's safety with and strength within numbers. And so come find a community that is doing the kind of work that you want to do as far as helping improve the environment, or if you can't find one, create your own. Yep. And so, with that said, I want everyone to have a wonderful evening and rest of the week. Peace and love, everybody.
So on. Be safe.
You too. Thank you.